Good evening and welcome to the Sleep to Law series. Tonight, we will talk about Dr. Hannibal Lecter, exploring the dark history and twisted psychology of the most sophisticated monster in literature and cinema. We will trace his path from a brilliant psychiatrist to a caged cannibal, examining the chilling events that took place in Baltimore and beyond. If you would like, subscribe or leave a comment to let us know you are listening. As a new channel, every member who joins is helping to build this library of lore from the ground up. If you want to support these deep dives, click the join button below. Before we begin, I have a question for you. Do you believe that a person can be born evil? Or is evil something that is created by the world they live in? Comment your thoughts below, as I am curious to hear your perspective. Now, let us descend into the dungeon. Chapter 1. The day begins with a tremble, a vibration of impending violence in the capital of the United States. We find Clarice Starling, now 32 years old, a veteran agent who wears her experience like armor, arriving at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms headquarters. It is a time of budget cuts and interagency friction, where headquarters are rented cheaply and equipment is worn. Starling joins a strike force squeezed into a surveillance van. The interior smells of stale sweat and old fear, a scent that never truly leaves the upholstery of undercover vehicles. She is an outsider here, a loner from the FBI to a joint task force, and the reception from the male officers is a mix of professional skepticism and objectification. Leading the team is John Brigham, a man Starling respects, a former Marine and her old firearms instructor. But even his authority can't scrub the tension from the air. They are hunting Evelda Drumgo. Evelda is not just a drug manufacturer. She is a widow to the violence of the streets, a former model-turned-methamphetamine queen with a history of lethal aggression. The intelligence suggests she is cooking a batch of ice at a fish market by the river. The danger here is compounded by biology. Evelda is HIV positive and known to use her own infected blood as a weapon if cornered. It is a terrifying biological warfare on a microscale, adding a layer of medical horror to the tactical threat. The van parks. The market is alive with the mundane and the grotesque. Crabs moving in crates, a shark being butchered, and the relentless pounding rhythm of La Macarena blasting from speakers. It is a surreal backdrop for what follows. Evelda emerges. She's not alone. She's flanked by armed guards, but more disturbingly, she carries an infant in a sling across her chest. The psychological hesitation this induces in the officers is exactly what she counts on. Starling attempts to de-escalate, pleading for surrender, but the streets do not negotiate. Chaos erupts. A Crip enforcement team in a Cadillac rolls up, turning the street into a kill box. Heavy automatic fire shreds the air. John Brigham is hit instantly, his face destroyed. The world dissolves into noise and blood. Starling, reverting to the cold precision of her training, engages the threats. She drops the driver of the Cadillac, but the horror is just beginning. Evelda Drumgo, amidst the carnage, does not surrender. She uses the body of her own child as concealment. From beneath the baby's blanket, a MAC-10 machine pistol roars. Starling is hit, the wind driven from her, her ear bloody. But survival instinct overrides pain. Evelda taunts her with a final venomous invitation to share her infection. Starling fires. The round takes Evelda in the upper lip, blowing out the back of her head. The silence that follows is heavy. Starling, concussed and bleeding, scrambles to the fallen mother. She cuts the screaming, blood-slicked infant from the harness. In a moment of desperate baptism, she rushes the child to a fish-cleaning table, washing away the infected blood of the mother with a spray hose amidst fish guts and shark heads. It is a tableau of biblical grotesquerie, life and death mingling in the salty runoff, all to the upbeat, mocking rhythm of a pop song that refuses to stop. Chapter 2. The aftermath of violence is often quiet, domestic, and lonely. Starling returns to her duplex in Arlington. The sensory overload of the gunfight is replaced by the rhythmic thrum of a washing machine. She strips off the evidence of the day, the fatigues, the blood-soaked bra, and subjects them to the scalding cycle. She sits on the floor, drinking Jack Daniels, leaning against the vibrating machine, as if seeking a heartbeat to replace the ones stopped that day. This is the unglamorous reality of the survivor, the adrenaline crash and the weeping in the dark. Ardelia Mapp, her housemate and anchor, finds her there. There is no bravado between them. Starling confesses the crushing weight of the event. She killed 5 people. But the spectre of Imelda Drumgo and that final, spiteful wish to infect Starling with HIV hangs heaviest. It is a violation of the spirit as much as the body. Chapter 3. If the gunfight was a physical assault, the days that follow are a reputational execution. The media descends like vultures. The National Tattler brands Starling the Death Angel. The context of the raid, the ambush, the cop-killing gangsters is stripped away. All the public sees is a high-definition image of Starling standing over a dead black mother, washing a baby on a cutting board. The optics are racial and political dynamite. Starling is isolated. The FBI, the institution she reveres, begins the slow, cold process of distancing itself. She is placed on administrative leave. The suits at the top are terrified of the bad press, comparing the incident to Ruby Ridge or Waco. Starling is no longer an agent. She is a liability. The grim irony is palpable. The woman who saved a senator's daughter from Buffalo Bill is now a pariah, hunted by the very public she serves. Chapter 4. The betrayal becomes systemic. We see Jack Crawford, Starling's mentor, running with the FBI director. Crawford is an old soldier nearing retirement, and the director makes it clear, Crawford must not intervene. To save his own legacy and pension, he must let Starling take the fall. It is a quiet, polite conversation between powerful men that seals the fate of a subordinate. Crawford, the man who sent Starling into the dark to find Buffalo Bill, is ordered to turn his face away while she is consumed by the bureaucracy. He feels the grime of it, remarking that he needs a shower, but he does not fight. Chapter 5. Starling seeks refuge in the Order of Mapp's side of the house, surrounded by the artifacts of a struggle for dignity. But the outside world intrudes in the form of a letter. It is elegant, scented, and terrifyingly familiar. Hannibal Lecter has found her. From his hiding place in the world, the doctor has watched her disgrace with the keen interest of a naturalist observing a favorite specimen. His letter is a masterclass in psychological dissection. He bypasses the shooting itself to probe the open wound of her psyche, her origins. He asks her to look into her iron skillet, to see her true self reflected in the black metal, not the ambitious agent but the daughter of a night watchman and a chambermaid. Lecter mocks her loyalty to the FBI. He asks if her dead parents would have wanted her to suck up to the bureaucrats who are currently destroying her. He validates her in a way her superiors refuse to, calling her a warrior. He offers a chemical metaphor for her character, placing her on the periodic table between iron and silver. It is a seduction of the mind, urging her to embrace her strength and reject the institutions that demand her submission. And of course he ends with the eternal question, the one that binds them together in the dark. Do you still wake up hearing the lambs? Chapter 6. Far away, in a room that breathes for him, another monster watches. Mason Verger is a living testament to Hannibal Lecter's cruelty. Paralyzed, disfigured, and dependent on a respirator that rhythmically forces air into his lungs, Mason lives in a dark chamber illuminated by an eel tank. He is immensely wealthy and immensely hateful. He reads the Tattler report on a large screen, using his limited mobility to scroll through the carnage. The news of Starling's disgrace and the existence of Lecter's letter excites him. His respirator speeds up, a mechanical panting that mirrors his obsession. Mason has a history with Lecter. He is the only victim to have survived the doctor, though survived is a loose term for a man whose face was fed to dogs. He sees Starling not as a person, but as bait, a way to draw the doctor out of the shadows. Chapter 7. The bureaucracy moves in for the kill at Buzzard's Point. Starling faces a tribunal of men who have never stood in the line of fire. Among them is Paul Crendler from the Justice Department, a man driven by petty jealousy and misogyny who has hated Starling since she eclipsed him in the Buffalo Bill case. They try to trap her. They suggest she panicked, that she was reckless. They try to strip the morality from her actions and replace it with liability. But Starling, perhaps bolstered by the iron truth Lecter pointed out to her, refuses to break. She sees the trap. She calls out the BATF representative Sneed for wearing a wire to a friendly meeting, a breach of the unspoken brotherhood of agents. She recounts the raid with clinical precision. She admits the horror of it, that she killed a mother holding a child, and she admits that it sickens her. But she refuses to let them sanitize their own cowardice. She identifies the leak that compromised the raid, pointing out it came from the local level, likely the very people now accusing her. The meeting dissolves in embarrassment for the men. Sneed is physically reprimanded for the wire, and the suits shuffle out, uncomfortable in the presence of raw integrity. But Crendler lingers. He looks at her with the hungry, hateful eyes of a scavenger. He sees a wounded animal, and he knows that if the FBI casts her out, she will be vulnerable. And in the shadows, the machinery of Mason Verger and the intellect of Hannibal Lecter begin to turn, triggered by the fall of Clarice Starling. Chapter 8. The basement offices of the FBI's Behavioral Science section have a specific kind of silence, cool, subterranean, and resistant to any attempt at cheerfulness. It is a space designed for the study of monsters, and no amount of paint can scrub away the feeling of a funeral parlor. Jack Crawford, the section chief, sits there among his files, a man slowly being eroded by the weight of his work and the illness of his wife. When Clarice Starling arrives, there is no need for handshakes. Their bond has been forged in the high-pressure fires of serial murder investigations. They are like weary soldiers who recognize the 1,000-yard stare in one another. The conversation that follows reveals the precariousness of Starling's career. She's been scapegoated for a botched drug raid, a lethal encounter that left her deafened and disillusioned. Crawford admits he lacked the political capital to save her on his own. In a twist of dark irony that defines their lives, her savior wasn't a superior officer or a senator, but the very monster she once hunted, Dr. Hannibal Lecter. His letter to her, sent from his hidden exile, froze the bureaucracy in its tracks. It seems Lecter enjoys the concept of Starling too much to let her be discarded by office politics. He is a predator who appreciates a worthy adversary, and perhaps, in his alien way, he feels a possessive sort of patronage toward her. Crawford points out the gunpowder still embedded in Starling's cheek from her battle with James Gum years ago. He calls it a mouche, a beauty mark that signifies courage. It is a poignant observation. Starling carries her trauma on her face, a permanent reminder of the violence she navigates. But Crawford has a new scent. He directs her toward Mason Verger, a surviving victim of Lecter's, who claims to have new information. It is the only lead they have, and for Starling, it is a ticket back into the hunt. Chapter 9. Muskrat Farm, the Verger estate in Maryland, is a place where old money masks the stench of the slaughterhouse. The Verger dynasty was built on meatpacking, on the industrial-scale processing of flesh, and though the mansion is surrounded by manicured lawns and grazing geese, the atmosphere is heavy with a witchy, unsettling potential. Starling is met by Margot Verger, a figure of intimidating physicality, a bodybuilder with a voice like grinding stones and eyes that glitter with dry irritation. There is a palpable tension here, the vibration of a house that holds deep, festering secrets. Margot leads Starling through a high-tech wing that feels more like a medical facility than a home, past a playroom watched by cold camera lenses to the sanctuary of Mason Verger. The room is dark, filled with the rhythmic, mechanical sigh of a respirator. When the lights are finally raised, the horror of Mason's existence is revealed. He is a man with no face. Lecter did not merely wound him, he unmade him. Mason has no lips, no nose, no eyelids, just a single lidless eye peering through a moisture-keeping monocle and a mouth that is nothing but exposed teeth and gums. He looks less like a human and more like a creature from the abyssal depths of the ocean, an eel rising from the dark. Mason's story of his therapy with Lecter is a descent into madness. He recounts how years ago he tried to impress the doctor with his own sexual perversions and sadism. But one does not play games with Hannibal Lecter. Under the influence of hallucinogens supplied by the doctor, Mason was suggested into peeling off his own face with a shard of mirror and feeding it to his dogs. He tells this story with a disturbing calmness, claiming he has found Jesus, referring to the Savior as the Riz. But this religious fervor feels manic, a performance of redemption rather than the real thing. He offers Starling a prize, an X-ray purchased from a corrupt source in Rio de Janeiro. It shows a hand with 6 fingers, Lecter's specific deformity. It is the first tangible trace of the doctor in 7 years. But the true nature of Mason Verger is revealed not in his wounds, but in his actions. After Starling leaves the room, Mason summons a foster child named Franklin. In a display of psychological torture that rivals anything Lecter might do, Mason terrifies the boy, telling him he is unwanted and manipulating him into believing he must poison his own cat to save it from a painful death. Mason drinks in the child's tears, collecting them on sterile swatches. He is not a victim who learned empathy. He is a monster who was simply outclassed by a greater monster. Chapter 10. The hunt for verification leads Starling into the dull, grinding gears of bureaucracy. She needs to match the Rio X-ray with Lecter's old medical records, but the past has been scattered. The Baltimore State Hospital for the Criminally Insane is closed, its archives lost or destroyed during the transition. Starling meets with Inel Corey, a former administrator who is more concerned with the memory of her lost fiancé, the incompetent Dr. Chilton, than with helping the FBI. It is a frustrating, gritty chapter of the investigation, highlighting how easily history disappears into cardboard boxes and damp basements. The system that was supposed to contain Lecter has disintegrated, leaving only rumors and missing files. Starling is forced to realize that if she wants the truth, she must return to the source. She must go back to the physical space where Lecter was caged. Chapter 11. The Baltimore State Hospital stands derelict, a rotting shell waiting for demolition. Starling's return to this place is a journey into the underworld. The building is secured by chains and misery, the air inside thick with mold and the smell of abandonment. She descends into the basement, the dungeon level where she first met Lecter. The contrast between the memory and the reality is stark. The high-security corridor, once vibrating with the tension of the insane, is now just a wet, trash-strewn hallway. She finds Lecter's cell. It is open, the bars useless now. Standing in the center of the space where the doctor spent 8 years, she expects to feel a presence, a lingering electrical charge of his evil. Instead, she finds nothing. The cell is merely empty space, devoid of the man. It is a profound realization for Starling. The monster is not the place, and he leaves no ghost behind. He has shed this skin completely. She locates the filing cabinets, rusted and unlocked. In a final indignity, she discovers that Lecter's file is cluttered with the records of Miggs, the inmate Lecter drove to suicide. Even in the archives, the chaos of the asylum persists. But the silence of the basement is broken. A figure emerges from the gloom, Sammy, a former inmate who has returned to the only home he knows, living in the squalor of the abandoned ward. He is a pathetic, terrifying figure, his mind broken by religious delusions, demanding to know if Starling is Jesus. The encounter is tense, balancing on the edge of violence. Sammy brandishes a shard of a plate, desperate and volatile. Starling, backing against the filing cabinets, uses the only tools she has, authority and unexpected kindness. She de-escalates the situation not with a bullet, but with a candy bar and a quiet recitation of Sammy's own nursery rhyme prayers. It is a moment that juxtaposes sharply with Mason Verger's cruelty. Where Mason tortured a child for pleasure, Starling offers dignity to a broken man in the dark. She retrieves the files and retreats, climbing out of the damp, suffocating basement and back into the grey light of the world, carrying the paper ghosts of the men who once tried to consume her. Chapter 12. The narrative shifts to the grimy, steam-choked streets surrounding Maryland Misericordia General Hospital. We find Barney, the former chief orderly of the Baltimore State Hospital for the criminally insane, leaving a grueling shift. The atmosphere is thick with the suffering of the city, a sensory overload that mirrors the chaotic environment where Barney once guarded Hannibal Lecter. Clarice Starling trails him, shedding her identity to blend into the urban decay, needing to approach him without the formality of the bureau. When she finally reveals herself, there is an immediate, unspoken recognition between them, a spark connecting the two people who manage to interact with the monster without being consumed by him. They retreat to a diner, a mundane setting for a conversation that peels back the layers of Lecter's captivity. Barney reveals he has been selling off Lecter's effects, drawings, books, profiting from the macabre celebrity of his former charge. It is a cynical but pragmatic survival strategy. Starling, however, is hunting for something specific, an X-ray of Lecter's wrist, taken after he maimed a nurse during his escape. During this exchange, Barney offers a profound psychological insight into Lecter's worldview. He explains that the doctor has no interest in hypothetical situations or rigid philosophies. Instead, Lecter believes only in chaos, not as a theory, but as a self-evident truth of the universe. This highlights the terrifying fluidity of Lecter's mind. He is not bound by the social contracts or moral syllogisms that constrain ordinary men. Barney also shares a chilling recollection involving a pigeon behavior known as rolling. Deep rollers are birds that tumble toward the earth in a genetic display. If two deep rollers breed, their offspring will simply plummet to their deaths, unable to pull up. Lecter had categorized Starling as a deep roller, someone genetically hardwired for dangerous, potentially fatal descents, driven by an innate compulsion rather than logic. Chapter 13. Clarice Starling finally obtains what she has struggled for, a workspace within the elite behavioral science section. Yet the victory is hollow, tainted by the petty bureaucratic malice of Paul Krendler, a man whose professional jealousy has calcified into obsession. He resents Starling not for her failures, but for her successes, a common theme in the institutional rot Starling faces. The investigation yields a breakthrough. The X-ray Barney provided matches one obtained from Mason Verger, the surviving victim of Lecter. The bone structure confirms that Lecter, who was born with a condition called polydactyly, a duplicate finger on his left hand, has had the extra digit surgically removed. This physical alteration is a crucial step in his camouflage. Starling, utilizing legitimate but aggressive technological surveillance, tracks Mason Verger's communications, realizing the wealthy invalid is conducting his own parallel illegal manhunt through a sports betting switchboard in Nevada. It becomes clear that the FBI is lagging behind a vengeful private citizen with unlimited resources. Chapter 14. Mason Verger is indeed steps ahead. Through a network of corrupt officials within the Department of Justice, Mason learns of the X-ray match before Starling does. His web of influence relies on bribery and the moral bankruptcy of public servants. Mason is not looking for justice. He is curating a theater of suffering. We delve into the darkness of Mason's existence at Muskrat Farm. Paralyzed, dependent on a respirator, and disfigured, Mason's life is a constant vigil of pain. However, his physical impotence has only sharpened his sadistic imagination. We are taken back to a Christmas past, where the juxtaposition of innocent carols and Mason's rhythmic mechanical breathing sparked a dark epiphany. He realized then that his purpose was not merely to survive, but to invert the act of communion. Instead of partaking in the body of Christ, he would orchestrate a profane ritual where the flesh of Hannibal Lecter would be consumed alive. This desire for transubstantiation through torture underlines Mason's psychopathy. He sees himself as a deity of vengeance, directing the blind fury of the universe. Chapter 15. The narrative explores the origins of Mason's cruelty, rooting it in his upbringing within the meatpacking empire of his father, Mason Verger. Mason's education was forged in slaughterhouses, learning the economics of death and the apathy of industrial killing. The text details the grotesque history of the Verger fortune, adulterating pig feed with waste, fighting humane slaughter laws, and experimenting with genetic manipulation to create fleshier swine. This history serves as the foundation for Mason's current project in Sardinia. He is applying his vast knowledge of animal husbandry to breed a specific engine of death. By crossing the giant forest pig with the aggressive European wild boar, Mason is bioengineering a creature designed for omnivorous violence. These are not merely farm animals. They are weaponized nature, bred for size, aggression, and bone-crushing power. The detailed description of the pig's dentition, 44 teeth designed to rip and crush, serves to foreshadow the brutal fate Mason intends for the Doctor. It is a perversion of nature, using the tools of creation to build a biological disposal unit. Chapter 16. With the biological components of his trap maturing in the mountains of Sardinia, Mason moves to the logistical phase. He contacts a filmmaker in Rome, a man named Oreste, who specializes in the sordid world of pornography and snuff films. Mason demands a high-quality production setup in the remote wilderness to record Lecter's demise. This request emphasizes the voyeuristic aspect of Mason's revenge. It is not enough for Lecter to die. The death must be captured, replayed, and owned. Mason effectively acts as a producer of his own snuff film, directing the lighting and sound of his enemies' torture from across the ocean. The inclusion of nature footage and bird calls in his instructions adds a layer of grotesque irony. Mason wants to aestheticize the murder, wrapping the horrific violence in the guise of a nature documentary. Chapter 17. The setting shifts dramatically to Florence, Italy. The atmosphere changes from the sterile horror of Mason's medical room to the heavy, shadow-drenched history of the Renaissance. We are introduced to Chief Investigator Rinaldo Pazzi of the Questura. Pazzi is a man haunted by his lineage. His ancestor was Francesco de' Pazzi, who was hanged and disemboweled for a conspiracy against the Medici family centuries prior. This historical weight presses on Rinaldo, who is currently disgraced and desperate to restore his family's fortune and his own reputation. Pazzi's psychological profile is that of a hunter who relies on visual intuition. He previously gained fame for catching a serial killer known as Il Mostro by recognizing a visual parallel between the killer's crime scenes and Botticelli's painting Primavera. This reliance on artistic imagery is crucial. Pazzi sees the world through the lens of art history. However, his success was short-lived, his reputation ruined by political maneuvering and overturned convictions. Now, standing in the piazza where his ancestor died, Pazzi is a man primed by desperation to make a moral compromise. He suspects that the monster, Hannibal Lecter, is hiding in plain sight within the Jewel of Tuscany. Chapter 18. This chapter expands on Pazzi's tragic arc. It details the glory days following his arrest of the murderer Tocca, a period where Pazzi was toasted by society and the church. The text illustrates the fickleness of public favor. One moment he is lighting the ceremonial dove at the Duomo, the next he is a pariah, stripped of influence and mocked by the press. This context is vital to understand why a lawman would consider selling a fugitive to a sadist like Mason Verger. Pazzi is not merely greedy. He is seeking a return to grace, a way to repurchase the dignity that was stripped from him. The shame of his public fall has hollowed him out, leaving a void that he believes only money and a final secret triumph can fill. He is a tragic figure, unknowingly stepping into a narrative far darker and more dangerous than the local crimes he is used to solving. Chapter 19. Pazzi's investigation into a missing museum curator brings him to the Palazzo Vecchio, the seat of Florentine power. He is there to interview the replacement curator, a man known as Dr. Fell. The meeting takes place in a hall filled with squabbling academics, a scene of petty intellectual chaos that Dr. Fell cuts through with surgical precision. Dr. Fell is described with an unnatural stillness, a small, sleek figure who commands the room not with volume, but with the sheer weight of his intellect. He silences the room by reciting Dante, displaying a mastery of archaic Tuscan that mesmerizes the scholars. Pazzi, however, is watching with the eyes of a policeman. He notes the lack of fear in Fell, the unnatural calm that should unsettle a normal man. The climax of the encounter occurs when Pazzi confronts Fell privately. He notices a fresh scar on the back of Fell's left hand, evidence of the surgery to remove the sixth finger. In a tense verbal sparring match, Fell deflects Pazzi's inquiries with ease, even noting Pazzi's resemblance to a figure in a Renaissance artwork. It is a moment of high-stakes recognition. Fell knows Pazzi's history, and Pazzi sees the monster beneath the scholar's mask. The chapter closes on the image of Dr. Fell's extraordinary stillness against the backdrop of the Duomo, a predator perfectly camouflaged in the high culture of Florence, waiting for the hunter to make his move. Chapter 20. In the heart of Florence, there exists a morbid fascination with the machinery of pain, a testament to how desensitized the modern soul has become. The exposition of atrocious torture instruments at the Fort de Belvedere drew crowds not out of historical curiosity, but from a deep-seated voyeurism. It is here, among the iron wheels and crushing devices, that Chief Inspector Rinaldo Pazzi finds the man known as Dr. Fell. The doctor stands in the gloom, absorbing not the exhibits but the faces of the spectators, a connoisseur observing the ugliness of humanity. Pazzi, a man burdened by the weight of his city's history and his own stalling career, is merely running errands. He's posting warnings about the monster of Florence, a serial killer he failed to catch, a failure that hangs over him like a shroud. But as he watches the stillness of Dr. Fell, a realization begins to crystallize, triggered by the scent of the sea and a visual memory from the FBI Academy in Quantico. He recalls a charcoal drawing of Florence, sketched from memory by the incarcerated Hannibal Lecter. The connection drops into his mind with the heavy finality of a stone in a pool. Dr. Fell is Hannibal Lecter. It is a moment of terrifying epiphany. The hunter has found the ultimate predator, yet Pazzi does not call for backup. The seeds of avarice are already taking root. Chapter 21. The ancient streets of Florence conceal as much as they reveal. The Palazzo Capponi, a structure steeped in centuries of power and intrigue, now houses the doctor. Pazzi stands outside in the damp chill, listening. From within the fortress-like walls comes the sound of a clavier playing Bach's Goldberg variations. The playing is technically precise, though slightly stiff in the left hand, a subtle betrayal of a past injury. Inside, the atmosphere is heavy with the weight of history. Dr. Lecter sits in the candle-lit grandeur, a spider in his web. He is not merely hiding, He is inhabiting a space that matches the complexity of his own mind. On the music rack, juxtaposed with the high art of Bach, sits a trashy tabloid featuring Clarice Starling. Even in exile, his obsession with her remains a tether to his past. He knows Patsy is outside. He smells the policeman's intent. To Lecter, Patsy is not a threat but a curiosity, a man whose moral compass is spinning wildly. The doctor reads his ancient manuscripts and considers the fate of the policeman, deciding to let the game play out a little longer. Chapter 22. Patsy's descent into corruption accelerates. He spends the night comparing ear shapes from photographs, confirming the identity of the monster. But rather than alerting the authorities, he turns to the forbidden fruit, the bounty. He accesses the FBI database, his heart racing not from duty, but from the prospect of wealth. He contacts the private number on Mason Verger's wanted poster. The voice on the other end is calm, transactional. Mason Verger, a victim who survived Lecter only to be left a disfigured husk, wants his revenge. But he is cautious. He demands proof, a fingerprint, fresh and in situ on an object. Patsy is no longer a servant of the law. He is now an agent of a vendetta, brokering the sale of a human being. Chapter 23. The internal battle within Patsy is brief and decisive. He stands where his ancestor was once burned for treachery, and the irony is palpable. The allure of a new life, of prestige bought with blood money, silences his conscience. He thinks of his wife and the expensive tastes he wishes to satisfy. The decision is not a sudden lightning strike, but a gradual hardening of the heart. He chooses to sell Lecter. It is a betrayal of his badge, but Patsy rationalizes it as a way to escape the mockery of his peers. He is a Patsy of the Patsy, and treachery runs deep in the bloodline. Chapter 24. To catch a monster, Patsy employs the desperate. He visits Soliciano prison to recruit Romula, a gypsy pickpocket. He holds her infant child, using the baby as leverage, a cruel tactic that highlights how far Patsy has fallen. He needs her to obtain the fingerprint, not by successfully stealing from Lecter, but by botching the attempt so that the doctor will grab her, leaving his prints on her or an object she carries. Romula, with the instincts of a survivor, senses the darkness in Patsy. She agrees not for money, but to protect her child from the state. Patsy is playing a dangerous game, using a lamb to bait a wolf. Chapter 25. The stakeout begins. From a borrowed apartment, Patsy and Romula watch the Palazzo Capone. When Lecter emerges, sleek and alert, they follow him to a gourmet food shop. The plan is set. Romula will intercept him on his return. But chaos is the rule of the street. As Lecter moves through the crowds, he changes course, heading toward the Ponte Vecchio. Romula's accomplice, a withered man named Gnocco, is ready to assist, but the opportunity evaporates. Lecter is elusive, moving with a purpose that frustrates their clumsy trap. Patsy's frustration mounts. He is a man trying to catch smoke with his bare hands. Chapter 26. The pursuit leads to the holy silence of the Church of Santa Croce. Here, amidst the tombs of Galileo and Michelangelo, Lecter is found rubbing an ancient inscription. It is a scene of profound contrast, the ultimate sinner working within the sanctuary of the saints. Romula approaches, her baby hidden, ready to enact the charade. But as she moves to bump into him, she looks into his eyes. What she sees there terrifies her beyond reason. It is not just a man, it is a void, a shaitan. The primal fear overrides her instructions. She recoils, fleeing before she can secure the print. Lecter continues his work, unbothered, a dark silhouette against the holy candles. Patsy is left with nothing but the trembling gypsy who has seen the face of the devil. Chapter 27. Desperation turns Patsy cruel. He threatens Romula with extended prison time and the loss of her child. She refuses to go near the devil again, but she offers a substitute, Gnocco. Patsy agrees. indifferent to who takes the risk as long as he gets his prize. He provides a silver bracelet, polished to hold a perfect fingerprint. They find Gnocco in a seedy piazza, a man worn down by life and addiction. For the sake of Romula, Gnocco agrees to the suicide mission. He takes the bracelet, unaware that he is walking into the jaws of a beast that eats souls. Chapter 28. The stage is set once again at the Fort de Belvedere. The atmosphere is thick with rain and impending violence. Lecter leaves the torture exhibit satisfied with his observations of the grotesque crowd. Patsy signals Gnocco. The small man weaves through the tourists and crashes into the doctor. It happens in a blur. Lecter grabs Gnocco's arm, but simultaneously, with the precision of a surgeon, he strikes. It looks like a mere scuffle, but a blade has pierced Gnocco's femoral artery. Lecter vanishes into the night. Patsy rushes to the fallen man. He finds the bracelet. The print is there, secured in the struggle. But Gnocco is dying. Blood pulses from his leg, his life draining away on the wet stones. Patsy, cold and calculating, feigns a call for help, but actually lets the man bleed out. He prioritizes the evidence over the life of his pawn. He retrieves the bracelet and watches the light fade from Gnocco's eyes. Patsy has his proof, but he is now complicit in murder. He stands in the rain, a rich man in potential, but a hollow man in reality. Chapter 29. The aftermath is a quiet exodus. Patsy arranges for Romula and her child to be shipped to Australia, fulfilling his end of the bargain to remove witnesses. He lies to them, saying Gnocco will follow later. But the old gypsy woman, Esmeralda, sees the truth. She looks at Patsy with ancient knowing eyes and tells him he has given Gnocco to the devil. She spits on his shadow, a curse from the powerless against the corrupt. Patsy stands on the dock, the money awaiting him, but the stain of his actions is indelible. He has traded his honor and a human life for Mason Verger's gold. Chapter 30. The final piece of the transaction takes place in the sterile, suffocating room of Mason Verger. The silver bracelet arrives in a delivery box. A technician, working under the unblinking gaze of Mason's single eye, dusts the object. The fingerprint is there, a perfect match for the middle finger and thumb of Dr. Hannibal Lecter. The blood on the bracelet is ignored, only the identity matters. Mason, a monster of a different breed, immobile and sustained by machines, begins to plan. The confirmation is the bell that starts the final hunt. Patsy has delivered the prey, but in doing so, he has invited a darkness into his life that money cannot banish. Chapter 31. The silence of the Gennargentu Mountains in central Sardinia is deceptive. It is a vast, ancient silence, broken now only by the breathing of men and the restless shifting of animals. In a sunlit pasture, a structure has been erected that serves as a monument to human cruelty. Beneath a timber shed hangs a massive Rococo mirror, stolen from a brothel, suspended over a livestock pen. It is a surreal juxtaposition, the gilt cherubs of the frame looking down upon a floor strewn with straw, designed for slaughter. This is the stage for Mason Verger's revenge. His men are here. Oreste, a pornographer turned filmmaker, and Carlo Deo Gracias, a kidnapper of the old Sardinian school. There is a distinct psychological divide here. Oreste is obsessed with camera angles and lighting, treating this preparation like art. Carlo, however, is a creature of primal violence. He knows that pigs do not kill cleanly. He remembers feeding a man to swine years ago, the screaming, the hesitation of the beasts, the necessity of slitting the victim's throat to encourage the animals to feed. They are rehearsing, not with a man, not yet, but with a grotesque effigy constructed by Carlo's brother, Matteo. They stuff old clothes with raw meat, dead chickens, and intestines, creating a meat puppet that smells of death and expensive cologne. It is a grim pantomime of what awaits Hannibal Lecter. As they activate the tape recorder, broadcasting pre-recorded human screams to stimulate the pig's appetite. The line between man and beast blurs. The swine emerge from the woods, drawn by the sounds of agony, ready to dine. Chapter 32. Rinaldo Pazzi travels to Geneva, a city of clockwork precision and hidden fortunes. He is there to touch the price of his soul. In a sterile, chapel-like room within a bank, he views $3 million in cash. For Pazzi, a man driven by visual imprints, the memory of blood, of nudity, of art, the sight of the money is a spiritual experience. It represents an escape from a pension-dependent future, a way to buy immortality for himself and his young wife. He speaks to Mason Verger over an encrypted line. The voice on the other end is breathy, rhythmic, and horrifyingly damaged, yet Pazzi ignores the warning signs. He confirms he will sell the curator of the Palazzo Capone. He justifies this betrayal with a cold, magisterial egoism. His happiness is worth more than the monster's life. He signs the papers, shaking hands with no one but the bank official. As he flies back to Florence, nature seems to rebel against his choice. The plane dodges through a violent thunderstorm, the lightning illuminating the Duomo below. Pazzi returns to his ancient city, carrying a secret that feels as heavy and charged as the air before a lightning strike. Chapter 33. The scene shifts to the Teatro Piccolomini, a jewel box of Baroque architecture. Pazzi and his wife Laura attend a concert seeking normalcy, but the predator is already in the room. From a high box, Dr. Hannibal Lecter watches, isolated and immaculate. When Pazzi locks eyes with him, the policeman feels the electric jolt of being seen by something other than human. During the intermission, Lecter descends. He does not flee, he engages. He charms Laura Pazzi, discussing music and presenting her with a rare, antique score. There is a terrifying tension here. Lecter is flirting with the wife of the man hunting him, invading Pazzi's personal sanctuary with impeccable manners. He smells the wife's perfume, tasting the air near her skin. It is a dominance display, subtle and overwhelming. Pazzi can only watch, paralyzed by the social contract, as the monster kisses his wife's hand. Lecter remains perfectly camouflaged in high society, a wolf in a tuxedo, agreeing to deliver a lecture to the Studiolo scholars the following night. Chapter 34. In the gloom of a cemetery in Impruneta, Pazzi meets his co-conspirator, Carlo. They stand among the tombs, illuminated only by grave candles. The setting is appropriate. They are plotting a death. Carlo, smelling of animal musk and violence, is eager to secure the prize. He wants to know if Lecter is armed, if he is fast. Pazzi warns him. The doctor is quick with a knife and moves low. They choreograph the abduction. It must be done outside the palazzo, in the open air, to avoid the complications of a struggle indoors. They agree on a spot near the Museo Bardini, where the shadows are deep. Carlo plans to use a net and tranquilizers, treating Lecter like dangerous game. There is a feral arrogance to Carlo. He believes a beanbag gun and a syringe are enough to subdue a creature of pure will. Pazzi, however, is haunted by the need to get Lecter out of Tuscany before the blood spills. He is trying to keep his hands clean, unaware that he is already stained. Chapter 35. Friday morning breaks in the Palazzo Capone. Dr. Lecter wakes instantly, his mind moving from a dream of his dead sister, Misha, to the sharp alertness of the present. He knows he is hunted. This knowledge does not frighten him, it clarifies him. He moves through the palazzo with the grace of a proprietor, though he is merely an interloper. He checks the FBI's website, seeing his own face on the most wanted list next to Clarice Starling's. He pauses to create a piece of art, a drawing of Starling with the body of a griffin. It is a glimpse into his psyche. He views her as a mythical creature, the honey in the lion, the only being capable of understanding his particular brand of divinity. Later, he ventures into the city, to a famous pharmacy. The scents of almond soap trigger a rush of memory. not of prison, but of Starling standing outside his cell. Scent is memory for Lecter, a way to travel through time. While he buys soaps, Carlo and his team are positioning themselves, waiting like spiders. Pazzi, meanwhile, prays in the Pazzi chapel. He thanks God for allowing him to remove a monster from the world, a breathtaking act of hypocrisy as he stands in a holy place built by his ancestors, preparing to commit betrayal for profit. Chapter 36. Night falls on the Palazzo Vecchio. The tourists are gone, leaving the medieval fortress to the shadows and the bats. Inside, the members of the studiolo gather. Dr. Lecter stands at the podium, ready to deliver a lecture that is both a scholarly triumph and a darkly comedic confession. His topic is Dante's Inferno, specifically the circle of the suicides and the betrayers. He speaks of Judas Iscariot and Pier della Vigna, men who died by hanging because of their avarice and treachery. He looks directly at Pazzi in the audience, mocking him with history and literature. Yet Pazzi is too blinded by greed to see the knife hidden in the words. Lecter projects images of hanging men, dissecting the agony of their deaths with clinical precision. When the lecture ends and the scholars depart, the trap springs, but not the one Pazzi intended. Lecter strikes with terrifying speed. He binds Pazzi to a hand truck, gagging him, rendering him helpless. Now, the roles are reversed. The predator interrogates the prey. Lecter reveals he knows everything: the sale to Mason Verger, the betrayal. He demands the FBI access codes, peeling away Pazzi's resistance with a simple, terrifying threat. Lecter wheels the bound policeman to the balcony. He shows Pazzi one final image, a drawing of Francesco de Pazzi, Rinaldo's ancestor, hanging from this very building centuries ago. History is a circle, and Lecter is closing it. He offers a final, chilling witticism about eating Pazzi's wife, then tips the hand truck. Pazzi falls. The noose, tied to a heavy floor polisher, snaps tight. His neck breaks, and the sudden stop rips his body open. He hangs in the floodlights, bowels spilling out, a grotesque reenactment of his ancestor's fate. Carlo rushes in, too late for the prize. He finds only the projected image on the wall. In the chaos, Lecter drops from a window, using a canvas dropcloth to cushion his fall and to crush Carlo's brother Matteo. The hunter becomes the killer, leaving one brother dead and the other broken, while he vanishes into the Florentine night on a stolen motorcycle, exhilarated by the violence. Chapter 37. An air ambulance cuts through the night sky towards Sardinia. It carries no patient, only the corpse of Matteo de Gracias. Carlo sits beside his brother, covered in blood, broken by grief. He calls Mason Verger. The conversation is a study in contrasts. Carlo is emotional, desperate, his world shattered. Mason is calm, detached, lying in his bed miles away, listening to the hum of his respirator. Mason cares nothing for the dead brother or the dead policeman. He cares only that the game continues. He manipulates Carlo, using the Sardinian's desire for revenge and money to keep him in play. Carlo, trapped by his own criminal reputation and the need to pay for his brother's family, agrees to continue the hunt. He is a tool that Mason will use until it breaks. Chapter 38. In the quiet village church of Santa Reparata, a suit of 15th century armor hangs on the wall. It is known as the Devil's Armor, complete with horns and cloven hooves. It is a symbol of evil contained within the sacred. Dr. Lecter attends Mass there, a solitary figure in the pew. When the church empties, he approaches the armor. He is not there to pray, but to retrieve. Inside the hollow chest of the metal demon, where a heart should be, Lecter has hidden his escape kit, passports, cash, the keys to his next life. It is a perfect metaphor for the man himself, a monster hiding in plain sight, wrapped in the trappings of history and culture. He retrieves his salvation from the devil's breast and prepares to leave Italy, his only regret being the music he did not get to play and the meals he did not get to cook. Chapter 39. The sun rises on a gruesome spectacle at the Palazzo Vecchio. The police work to lower Rinaldo Pazzi's body, a delicate operation requiring nets to catch his spilled viscera. The image evokes the great deposition paintings, a final dark irony for a man who loved art. The investigation begins. At first, there is confusion, suicide, ritual murder. But the evidence points one way. A sketch is made. Fingerprints are lifted from the noose and the kitchen. The slow machinery of international law enforcement begins to turn. The prints match. The alarm sounds at FBI headquarters. The news ripples outward. Mason Verger knows. Jack Crawford knows. And finally, Clarice Starling is told. Lying in the dark, she visualizes the face of the man who has once again torn through the fabric of the world. She does not cry. She simply stares into the dark, knowing that the monster is free and that he is thinking of her. Chapter 40. The mountains of Sardinia offer no comfort to the failures of men. The air ambulance, carrying the weight of a botched abduction and the corpse of a brother, refuses to land in the dark at Arbatax. By the time they touch down, the sunrise casts a deceptive, rosy glow on the dead face of Matteo, a stark contrast to the darkness brewing in the hearts of his survivors. When Carlo and the Sardinians finally return to their crude mountain base, the atmosphere is heavy with unspoken grief and impending violence. They have returned with an empty coffin, but the machinery of death, once set in motion, is difficult to halt. Oreste Pini, the television producer orchestrating this macabre snuff film, greets them with an arrogance that borders on suicidal. He is a man obsessed with the image, not the reality of violence. He suggests a fabrication, use a fake body, a simulado, and trick the voracious pigs into a frenzy for the cameras. He believes he can direct nature just as he directs a scene. Carlo, grieving and untethered by the loss of his brother, looks at Oreste not as a man, but as a resource. In a moment of brutal efficiency, Carlo slashes Oreste and throws him into the pen. This is the grim reality of the Verger vendetta. It consumes everyone it touches. The wild boars, starved for days and driven by primal instinct, do not distinguish between a master criminal and a foolish producer. As the animals tear Oreste apart, silencing his screams by removing his jaw, the cameraman attempts to flee, only to be cut down by Piero's shotgun. The scene ends in silence, save for the feeding animals. The cinema of death continues, but the cast has changed. Chapter 41. Across the ocean at Muskrat Farm, the silence is different. It is the silence of wealth insulating madness. Mason Verger, the puppet master, is less concerned with the loss of his hired guns and more agitated by the financial inconvenience. He seeks comfort in cruelty, tormenting his sister Margot and feeding ornamental carp to a moray eel, a reflection of his own predatory nature, trapped in a broken body. Mason obsesses over the footage of Rinaldo Pazzi's death in Florence. He watches it on a loop, but not for the gore. He is fixated on a single haunting detail: Dr. Hannibal Lecter, standing on the balcony waving, "Bye-bye." It is a wave from the wrist, childlike and mocking. In this moment, we see the true dynamic between the two. Mason is the hateful child in the dark, and Lecter is the monster who acknowledges him. The wave is a promise of unfinished business. Chapter 42. Clarice Starling finds herself in a bureaucratic purgatory. The FBI, rather than celebrating her survival or utilizing her skills, isolates her. The identification of Lecter as Pazzi's killer reignites the hunt, but Starling is marked by the stigma of her previous gunfight. Yet, isolation breeds focus. Starling begins to abandon the rigid religion of technique that the FBI instills in its agents. She realizes that standard procedure cannot catch a man who operates on a plane of pure aesthetics. She decides to hunt Lecter not through grids and dragnets, but through the corridors of his taste. She studies his preferences, the specific vintage of Batard Montrachet, the white truffles, and crucially, his love for high-performance vehicles. She predicts his next acquisition will not be a Bentley, but a supercharged Jaguar, something with power that doesn't need to scream. This shift in Starling's methodology is profound. She is beginning to think like the predator to catch him, stepping into his world of refined hedonism. She realizes that while his face may change, his appetites are immutable. Chapter 43. The game of cat and mouse escalates with a letter. Mason Verger receives correspondence on the stationery of a Florentine hotel. It is from Lecter. The letter is a masterclass in psychological flaying. Lecter thanks Mason for the bounty, noting it acts as a perfect early warning radar. But the doctor strikes deeper, reminiscing about the time Mason, under the influence of hallucinogens, cut off his own face and fed it to his dogs. Lecter casually compares the texture of Mason's nose to a chicken gizzard. He taunts Mason with the biblical parallel of Jezebel, eaten by dogs, and ends with a chilling promise: Mason will see Lecter's face before he dies. It is a promise of reunion that Mason both desires and dreads. Chapter 44. The corruption of the law draws closer to the center of the web. Paul Crendler, the ambitious Justice Department official, arrives at Muskrat Farm. The setting is surreal. Crendler, a man of petty government greed, negotiating with Mason, a breathing corpse in a respirator, while Mason's terrifyingly muscular sister Margot looms in the shadows eating walnuts. They strike a Faustian bargain. Mason agrees to fund a smear campaign against Crendler's political opponent, using millions of dollars to destroy a man's reputation, in exchange for Crendler providing raw, unfiltered FBI intelligence on Lecter. Crendler agrees to give Mason access to the VICAP database, effectively selling out the law for personal gain. Mason wants Lecter caught alive, not by the FBI, but by his own men, to endure a slow, agonizing death that bypasses the mercy of the justice system. Chapter 45. The perversity of the Verger legacy is explored in the quiet aftermath of the meeting. Margot and Mason are left alone. Margot, damaged by years of Mason's abuse and her own steroid use, wants something from her brother, his DNA. She and her partner want a child, a Verger heir to secure the inheritance. Mason, cruel to the bitter end, mocks her desires. He dangles the possibility of providing a sample, but uses it as leverage, a tool to manipulate her into handling the illegal data transfer with Crendler. The interaction highlights the absolute toxicity of the Verger bloodline, a family bound not by love, but by mutual loathing and biological necessity. Chapter 46. In contrast to the Vergers, Clarice Starling finds a semblance of family with her roommate, Ardelia Mapp. While cooking, a domestic ritual of creation standing against the destruction of their work, Mapp reveals that Starling's mail is being monitored. The surveillance is clumsy, likely not the work of professionals, but it signals that Starling is being squeezed from within. They discuss the inevitable confrontation. Starling admits that if she corners Lecter, she might not shoot. She isn't driven by fear, but by a complex respect for the truth he represents. She acknowledges that she would let the outcome be decided by him. It is a dangerous admission, implying that the bond forged through the glass at the asylum has grown stronger than her badge. Chapter 47. Starling visits the shooting range, reenacting the trauma of the drug raid for the official investigation. The repetition of violence wears her down. She visits Jack Crawford, her mentor, but finds him diminished, a lion growing old and toothless, unable to protect her from the political sharks. Later she visits the grave of John Brigham at Arlington. Amidst the cold marble and falling leaves, she contemplates the waste of good men by tired, corrupt systems. It is a moment of profound loneliness. The institutions she believed in, the FBI, the concept of justice, are failing her, leaving her isolated as the shadow of Hannibal Lecter grows longer. Chapter 48. Dr. Hannibal Lecter is already among them. He sits in the steerage section of a 747 heading for Detroit, disguised as a tourist in a hockey warm-up suit. The setting is banal, cramped seats, crying babies, bad smells. But Lecter exists in a world of his own making. While others eat processed airline food, he unpacks a gourmet lunch of truffles and foie gras, tolerating the intrusion of an annoying child beside him, with the detached patience of a predator not currently hungry. To escape the sensory assault of the economy class, Lecter retreats into his memory palace. This is the most vital insight into his psyche. His mind is a vast, constructed architecture, a palace of 1,000 rooms where he stores art, knowledge, and memories. He walks the halls of his mind, visiting the Rias bronzes and retrieving Starling's home address from a specific tableau. But even the memory palace has its dungeons. Lecter inadvertently steps near the trauma that defined his existence. He recalls the winter of 1944, the deserters, the starvation, and the axe. He remembers the prayer he made to see his sister Misha again, and the cruel irony of seeing her milk teeth in the waste pit after she had been consumed. The memory is so agonizing that the doctor, usually a being of perfect control, screams aloud on the plane. He wakes, sweating, back in the mundane horror of the cabin. The annoying child offers him comfort, a rare moment of human connection. Lecter composes himself and begins to sketch Clarice Starling on a piece of stationery. He draws her looking like a child with tears in her hair, perhaps seeing the echo of Misha in the woman who hunts him. He is crossing the ocean, bringing his old world ghosts to the new world. Chapter 49. The descent into the underworld often begins not with fire, but with bureaucracy. Clarice Starling, finding herself suffocated by the paper walls of her cubicle, retreats to the basement of Quantico. It is a space intended for darkness, a future photography lab, windowless and sealed with blackout curtains. Here, in this subterranean silence, she constructs a shrine to the monster she hunts. It is a place of obsession, quickly dubbed Hannibal's house by a cynical colleague, a name Starling adopts with a grim sort of ownership. She wrests control of the Columbia University archives, bringing the entirety of Hannibal Lecter's documented life into her dungeon. Amidst the smell of book dust and the hum of a computer, she reconstructs the doctor. One wall displays his brutality in Italy, the hanging Patsy, while another showcases the medieval artistry of his earlier kills. But the true horror lies not in the gore, but in the refinement. Starling lays out a single place setting of Lecter's surviving fine china and crystal, a ghost of elegance amidst the grotesque evidence photos. She is profiling his taste, understanding that a creature of such specific appetites will not deny himself the luxuries of the world for long. Paul Crendler, the embodiment of bureaucratic malice, invades this sanctuary. He brings with him the scent of shoe polish and political ambition. Crendler views Lecter merely as a career stepping stone, a media boogeyman to be exploited. He mocks Starling's methods, unable to comprehend the psychological intimacy required to catch a predator of this magnitude. Starling, however, sees through Crendler's expensive suit to the hollow man beneath. She details her strategy, tracking the purchase of rare wines like Batard Montrachet, specific truffles, and subscriptions to obscure journals. Lecter is a man who consumes the world with discerning cruelty, and his consumerism will be his trail. As they exit into the autumn air, Starling strips away the pretense of professional courtesy. In a moment of raw confrontation, she exposes the wire-free reality of their conversation and challenges Crendler's petty hatred. Crendler, rejected and venomous, retreats to his car, muttering slurs that reveal the depth of his misogyny. He is a small evil, unwittingly conspiring with a much greater one. Chapter 50. The scene shifts to the suffocating opulence of Muskrat Farm, where Mason Verger's vendetta festers in the dark. Crendler, now fully complicit in Mason's schemes, listens as Dr. Domling, a psychiatrist with a high opinion of his own intellect, attempts to dissect the bond between Starling and Lecter. Domling proposes a theory of avunculism, suggesting Lecter poses as a wise uncle figure to manipulate Starling, exploiting her orphan status and father fixation. It is a clinical, sterile analysis that misses the visceral reality of the connection. Domling projects images of Lecter's artwork, the crucifixion clock, where Starling's face is superimposed onto Christ, nailed through the wrists. It is an image of martyrdom and obsession. Domling argues that Lecter's goal is Starling's degradation and death, claiming the doctor is incapable of affection. He posits that to draw the monster out, they must distress the object of his fixation. They must wound the bird to call the cat. It is a strategy of calculated cruelty, reducing Starling to mere bait in a trap set by men who understand neither the hunter nor the hunted. Chapter 51. To counter Domling's academic arrogance, Mason brings in Barney, the former orderly who watched Lecter for years from the other side of the bars. Barney offers a perspective grounded in observation rather than theory. He describes a relationship defined by a strange, formal courtesy. Lecter, he asserts, never deigned to lie. He found Starling amusing, possessing the earnestness of a cub destined to become a predator herself. Barney recounts the origins of their bond, the moment an inmate flung bodily fluids at Starling, and Lecter's subsequent lethal retaliation against the offender. It was not kindness, but a defense of order and dignity. Barney suggests that Lecter respects Starling's discipline and courage, a notion that Domling dismisses as romanticized delusion. Yet the seeds of the plan remain unchanged. Mason intends to use Starling's suffering as a beacon. If Lecter sees her wounded, not physically but professionally and symbolically, his perverse curiosity, and perhaps his possessive instinct, will bring him running. Chapter 52. The trap is baited with betrayal. Crendler admits he cannot simply hand Starling over due to FBI surveillance, but he can destroy her standing. Mason reveals he has already planted a fake message in the personal columns of international newspapers, a note signed Hannah, the name of Starling's childhood horse. It frames Starling as having communicated with the fugitive doctor, thanking him. This fabricated evidence is a felony that will strip Starling of her badge, her gun, and her agency. It is a move designed to isolate her completely. Mason Verger, gasping within his respirator, plots to break her spirit, so that when the monster comes, she will be standing alone in the open. They will strip away her armor, leaving the earnest part of her to face the darkness, while Mason salivates over the prospect of her destruction. Chapter 53. In the natural world, far from the machinations of men, a different kind of hunt begins. Clarice Starling runs through a Virginia state park, seeking solace in the rhythm of her breath and the beauty of the autumn woods. She is unaware that the landscape itself is watching. Hannibal Lecter, camouflaged and still as a stone, observes her through high-powered optics. For the first time in years, he sees her whole. He inhales the complex bouquet of the forest, dead leaves, musk and decay, but his mind seeks only her scent. Watching her run, a memory dislodges itself from the deep vaults of his mind. He is transported back to his family estate in Lithuania, to his sister Misha, and the purple eggplants she loved. The memory shifts from the warmth of the sun to the cold reality of loss, the deer with the arrow, the foreshadowing of slaughter. Lecter moves with the silence of a ghost. He locates Starling's Mustang in the parking lot. He does not steal the car, he invades its intimacy. Breaking in, He sits in her seat, breathing in the concentrated essence of her life. In a moment of terrifying, sensual, bizarre behavior, he tastes the leather of the steering wheel where her hands rest. It is a communion of taste and scent, a violation that leaves no mark. He absorbs her presence into his memory palace, storing the sensory details of her existence before vanishing back into the shadows, leaving the car locked and seemingly untouched. Chapter 54. The vampire may be territorial, but the cannibal is a nomad of high tastes. Lecter has established a comfortable, clandestine existence on the Maryland shore. His camouflage is perfect. A mundane pickup truck for utility, a Jaguar for pleasure, and a home filled with the finest things his illicit wealth can acquire. He is not merely hiding. He is thriving, indulging in a life of aesthetic perfection. He fills his home with music, purchasing a rare harpsichord and a theremin, an instrument played without touch, drawing sound from the air like magic. He equips his kitchen with copper cookware and his larder with the finest wines. Yet among these domestic treasures lies a striker autopsy saw, a reminder that his culinary arts require a specific kind of butchery. Alone he plays the harpsichord. The music should be a solace, but the earlier sight of Starling and the resurfaced memory of Misha haunt him. The trauma of his past, the sister he could not save, the cannibalism forced upon him, ruptures the elegant facade. The music stops. A scream, thin and terrible, tears through the house. It is the sound of the wounded child buried deep within the monster, a momentary crack in the porcelain mask of his sanity before the silence returns. Chapter 55. Seeking tools for his trade, Lecter attends a gun and knife show, a gathering of the fearful and the aggressive. He moves through the crowd of camouflage-clad men with the disdain of a wolf walking among mongrels. The guns do not interest him. He seeks the silence of blades. He purchases high-quality knives and a powerful crossbow, weapons of stealth and precision. While examining the wares, he observes a boorish man, Donny Barber, a poacher who disrespects the artistry of the hunt. Barber represents everything Lecter loathes: rudeness, lack of discipline, and cruelty without purpose. Lecter watches him, recording his face and his behavior. When Barber enters a raffle for a hunting trip, Lecter seizes the opportunity. With sleight of hand, he steals the man's contact information from the box. It is a petty theft with lethal implications. The rude hunter has unwittingly placed himself on the menu, his fate sealed by a moment of casual discourtesy in the presence of death himself. Chapter 56. Back at Muskrat Farm, the atmosphere is heavy with physical tension. In the high-tech gym, Mason Verger and Barney engage in a silent contest of strength. Margot, massive and muscular, challenges Barney to a bench press. It is a display of power, a rejection of the victimhood her brother tried to force upon her. They bond over their shared physicality, two outliers in a world that judges them. Margot challenges Barney to crack a walnut in one hand, a feat of crushing grip strength. Barney fails, the egg he holds crushing instead, but the moment serves to humanize them. They are the physically imposing guardians of this twisted narrative, respecting each other's capacity for violence. It is a brief interlude of camaraderie in a house built on pain. Chapter 57. Starling continues her reconstruction of Lecter's past, reaching out to the women who survived his social circle. She speaks with a wealthy socialite who remembers Lecter's charm and his exquisite taste in gifts, keyed perfectly to birthdays and anniversaries. It is a reminder of his seductive power. He was a monster who knew how to make people feel seen before he consumed them. She then contacts Senator Martin, the mother of the girl Starling saved from Buffalo Bill. The conversation reveals Lecter's profound cruelty. He had once taunted the senator about breastfeeding her missing daughter, turning a mother's love into a weapon of psychological torture. He feeds on pain as much as flesh. Starling obsessively catalogues these details: the wines, the suits, the cruelties. She is building a net made of data. But the theoretical work is cut short. The red phone rings. A sheriff in Virginia has a body. It has been trimmed for meat. The intellectual game is over. The physical horror has returned. Lecter has begun to feed again, and the trail of blood is fresh. Chapter 58. The Clarendon County Morgue is a place of stainless steel and forced air, a transitional threshold between the living world and the silence of the grave. Here, Clarice Starling forces her way past the flashbulbs of the press, flashing her badge to enter a sanctuary of the dead. Inside, the atmosphere is clinical, the air filled with the whine of bone saws, a sound that strips away humanity to reveal mere biology. Dr. Hollingsworth, a pathologist with eyes as bright and hard as peeled eggs, presides over a macabre tableau that defies the usual tragic banality of car accidents and heart failures. 2 tables are occupied. On one lies a deer, on the other a man named Donnie Barber. The visual symmetry is jarring, a deliberate artistic choice by the killer that forces the observer to equate the two. Both bodies have been butchered with identical surgical precision. Barber, a known poacher, has been dismantled not as a victim of rage, but as livestock. His lungs have been pulled through his back to resemble wings, a Norse ritual known as the Bloody Eagle. Starling recognizes the ancient cruelty immediately. It is not the compulsive, chaotic work of a madman, but the calculated whimsy of Hannibal Lecter. To Lecter, the poacher was simply another animal in the woods, unworthy of the life he took from the deer. The scene suggests a terrifying moral hierarchy where Lecter sits at the apex, judging who is hunter and who is meat. Chapter 59. The investigation moves from the visceral to the microscopic. In the sterile, fluorescent hum of the DNA lab, the past reaches out to strangle the present. A young technician, A. Benning, initially dismissive of another piece of bad evidence, is guided by Starling's sharp eye. They compare a painted crossbow quarrel found at the crime scene with a toothbrush sent from Italy, an artifact from Lecter's life in Florence. The science confirms what intuition already screamed. The DNA matches. The monster is no longer a ghost in Europe. He is physically present on American soil. The technician, sensing the weight of this discovery, looks at Starling with a mixture of awe and pity. Starling has become a totem for these women in law enforcement, a figure of strength, yet she is inextricably bound to the other. The net is tightening, but as is often the case when hunting apex predators, locating the beast is only the first most dangerous step toward becoming prey. Chapter 60. At Muskrat Farm, the darkness is of a different quality, suffocating and rich. Mason Verger, a living gargoyle trapped in his respirator, conducts business from his bed. His cruelty has not been dampened by his paralysis, it has merely been distilled. His majordomo Caudle reports on a loose end. A foster mother needs hush money because a child, Franklin, poisoned himself after Mason suggested the boy kill his own cat. Mason's manipulation of children remains his most repulsive trait, a psychological cannibalism that mirrors Lecter's physical consumption. Listening from the shadows is Margot Verger. She hears the casual malice in her brother's voice, the bureaucratic dismissal of human suffering. She lies still, timing her breath to the mechanical hiss of Mason's iron lung, a survival mechanism born of a lifetime of abuse. The eel in Mason's aquarium sees her, but her brother does not. In this house, invisibility is the only armor. Chapter 61. Margot finds solace in the physical, forging a bond with Barney, the former asylum orderly, who now tends to Mason. Their relationship is constructed in the gym, amidst the clanking of iron and the smell of sweat, a place where the body is something to be built and defended, not destroyed. There is a raw, unspoken solidarity between them, 2 outliers in Mason's twisted kingdom. The tension shifts in the communal shower, where the lines of friendship blur into a misunderstanding of desire. Barney, misreading the intimacy of their shared isolation, makes a pass. Margot's reaction is violent and defensive, a flash of the trauma she carries. Yet the aftermath is not a severance, but a realignment. Later, in the safety of Barney's quarters, they reconcile. Margot reveals her truth. Her rejection is not about him, but her own nature. They agree to a platonic alliance, a pact of survival. In the orbit of Mason Verger, human connection is a rare and fragile commodity, one that must be protected from the corrosive atmosphere of the farm. Chapter 62. Dr. Lecter, now fully ensconced in his new American hunting grounds, engages in his rituals of taste. He decants a rare vintage, the wine's sediment settling like the memories of his crimes. He cooks with the same precision he applies to murder, preparing a stock that includes a crow fed on juniper berries. The act of cooking is, for Lecter, a divine synthesis of nature and culture. As the aromas fill his hideout, his mind drifts back to the woods. He replays the killing of the poacher, Donnie Barber. It was a moment of supreme judgment. Barber, the crude butcher, interrupted by Lecter, the master artist. In his memory, the violence is set to the music of Bach. He envisions Starling running through the leaves, her vitality contrasting with the stillness of death. To Lecter, she is a mythical figure, perhaps Artemis, the only being worthy of sharing his world. He toasts to her approaching birthday, the wine in his glass glowing with the color of her skin. It is a chilling reminder that in Lecter's mind, adoration and consumption are dangerously close to being synonyms. Chapter 63. The machinery of bureaucracy begins to grind against Starling. In the DNA lab, the match is confirmed. The toothbrush from the Palazzo Capone and the eyelash from the arrow belong to Hannibal Lecter. However, information is a weapon, and it is intercepted. Paul Krendler, Starling's nemesis at the Department of Justice, receives the news first. Krendler immediately relays this to Mason Verger. The strategy shifts. Mason commands Krendler to get Starling out, to strip her of her badge and protection. The goal is to leave her exposed, a tethered goat to lure the tiger. It is a conspiracy of spite and vengeance, where Starling's career is sacrificed on the altar of Mason's obsession. Mason's energy is fading, but his mind remains a sharp, malicious instrument. He orders Cordell to summon the pigs, signaling the final phase of his revenge. Chapter 64. The focus shifts to a primal force of nature being transported across the ocean. Carlo Deogracias, a man who understands beasts better than men, oversees the shipment of 16 wild boars from Sardinia. These are not ordinary swine, they are monsters of muscle and appetite, selectively bred and trained for one purpose, to consume living human flesh. The logistics are complex, a dark mirror to the shipment of fine art or wine. Permits are forged, bribes are paid. Carlo cares for his charges with a tenderness that belies their terrifying nature, checking their heartbeats as they fly over the Atlantic. He envisions the banquet Mason has planned. Lecter eaten alive, feet first, the meal prolonged by saline drips and medical intervention. It is a vision of hellish retribution, where the sophisticated cannibal is devoured by the basest of animals. Chapter 65. In the sunlit dust of the barn at Muskrat Farm, surrounded by the smell of hay and old leather, a conspiracy is hatched. Margot and Barney sit beneath the skull of a racehorse, a reminder of the Verger legacy of breeding and death. Margot proposes a deal that is staggering in its implications: $5 million for Barney's help. The plan involves harvesting Mason's sperm, for the family line must continue, but the man must not, and then killing him. Margot explains the method with chilling pragmatism, smothering him within the iron lung, leaving no forensic trace. She appeals to Barney's greed, but also to his survival instinct, warning him that Mason will eventually discard him. Barney, a man of simple but rigid ethics, refuses the act of murder, but listens. He is fired technically to protect him, but the seed of treason has been planted. The conversation highlights the pervasive corruption of the Verger estate. No one stays innocent in Mason's shadow. Chapter 66. The transport arrives at Muskrat Farm in the dead of night. The juxtaposition of the modern world and ancient savagery is stark as the giant pigs are offloaded into the pony stalls. Carlo Deogracias moves with the caution of a bomb technician. He knows that these animals possess a terrible practicality and a spark of intelligence that makes them unpredictable. They are not merely aggressive. They are premeditated in their movements. They watch the men with small, glazed eyes, waiting for a mistake. Carlo prepares the environment, ensuring the pigs remain hungry, turning the farm's woodland into a gladiatorial arena. The presence of the pigs changes the very atmosphere of the farm, introducing a heavy, musky scent of impending violence. As the pigs sleep, dreaming of the hunt, the horse skull watches over them, a silent witness to the carnage to come. Chapter 67. Paul Krendler prepares his assault on Starling's career. His motivation is a toxic cocktail of political ambition and deep-seated misogyny. He resents Starling not just for her competence, but for what she represents, a woman who refuses to play by the unspoken rules of his boys' club. He plans to frame her, using Mason's fabricated evidence to destroy her credibility just as the FBI celebrates its birthday. Krendler's internal monologue reveals a pathetic, insecure man who fantasizes about Starling's humiliation. He comforts himself with the naval metaphor of throwing a loose cannon overboard, blinding himself to the reality that he is merely a pawn in Mason Verger's game. He is the banality of evil personified, a bureaucrat using paper and procedure to destroy a life because he lacks the soul to understand it. Chapter 68. The scene shifts to the desolate, wind-swept plains of Texas. In a small cemetery, Dr. Lecter oversees an exhumation. He poses as a bereaved relative, Mr. Closter, playing the part with impeccable politeness. The grave yields a collapsed coffin and a skeleton clad in the rags of a cowboy. Lecter is not here for sentiment. He collects the bones, the cowboy hat, and the boots, treating them as necessary supplies. There is a profound disrespect for the sanctity of the grave, yet a reverence for the utility of the dead. He packs the remains into a viola case, an instrument of art, now carrying the instruments of deception. Lecter moves through the world like a shadow, repurposing the dead to aid his survival, transforming a Texas cowboy into a prop for his next performance. Chapter 69. Monday brings the crushing weight of reality to Clarice Starling. While tracking exotic wine purchases, her best lead on Lecter, she encounters the invisible walls erected by her own agency. The system she believes in is glitching, sabotaged from within. When she tests a phone number from her investigation, Paul Krendler answers. The realization is immediate and devastating. Her line is tapped, her investigation hijacked. She sits in the silence of her office, spinning in her chair, looking at the artifacts of her hunt. The FBI, her surrogate family, has betrayed her. As she walks to her car, passing the empty office of Jack Crawford, she knows with a heavy finality that she is leaving Quantico for the last time. She is now entirely alone, sandwiched between the monster she hunts and the monsters who employ her. Chapter 70. The machinery of bureaucracy often moves with the same cold, crushing inevitability as a glacier, and for Clarice Starling, the freeze set in on a December evening. A federal marshal arrived at her home, not with handcuffs, but with a summons. It was a vague, menacing notice from the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, demanding her presence the following morning. There was no explanation, no charges listed, just the stark command of authority. Starling's friend and roommate, Ardelia Mapp, recognized the scent of a trap immediately. In the tactical landscape of the FBI's internal politics, silence is a weapon. If there were legitimate criminal charges, there would be paperwork, lawyers, and disclosure. This ambush by the Inspector General suggested a political witch hunt, likely orchestrated by Paul Crendler, a man whose ambition was matched only by his deep-seated resentment of Starling. Mapp advised her to tape the proceedings, warning that in the halls of power, the truth is often edited in post-production. Starling called Jack Crawford her mentor, but he sounded distant, his voice heavy with a fatigue that went beyond mere tiredness. He promised to be there, but the old lion was losing his roar. Chapter 71. The next morning, the J. Edgar Hoover building stood like a concrete fortress against a milky sky, ringed by crash barriers, a monument to an era of paranoia and car bombs. Starling found Crawford waiting for her. He looked diminished, his face grey, a drop of fluid trembling at the tip of his nose. He was a man eroding before her eyes. They were walking into an ambush. As they approached the entrance, a camera crew, tipped off by someone inside, swarmed them. They demanded comments on the Feliciana shootout, framing Starling not as a survivor, but as a suspect. It was a calculated move to rattle her before she even stepped into the room. Crendler's fingerprints were all over the leak. Inside, Crawford surmised the timing was deliberate. Amidst the noise of the Bureau's 90th anniversary celebrations and impending presidential visits, Starling's professional execution could be carried out quietly, buried under the headlines. Chapter 72. The hearing took place in the plush, smoke-scented office of an assistant director, a room designed for the comfort of powerful men. The tribunal consisted of Starling's superiors and the inevitable Paul Crendler, alongside an Italian diplomat named Montenegro. When Crawford attempted to stand by Starling, Crendler dismissed him with a sneer, stripping away the last vestige of Crawford's protective authority. The section chief was forced to leave, and Starling faced the firing squad alone. The accusation was precise and damning, unlawful disclosure of sensitive material to a fugitive. They presented a smudged clipping from a Florentine newspaper, La Nazione, containing a coded warning to Hannibal Lecter addressed to A. Aaron and signed Hannah. It was a frame-up, clumsy, but effective. They claimed the code was known only to the Bureau and Lecter, conveniently ignoring that the CIA had intercepted it. But the true violation was the physical evidence Crendler produced next. He reached into a battered box and pulled out intimate items, almond soaps and perfumes from the Santa Maria Novella in Florence. These were gifts sent to Starling by Lecter himself. Crendler revelled in the implication of intimacy, holding up a letter written on parchment. In his copperplate script, Lecter had written a reference to Samson's riddle, "You are the honey in the lion." It was a message of perverse admiration, casting Starling as a creature of strength and sweetness, but in this room it was painted as evidence of collusion. Starling was placed on administrative leave. She was stripped of her badge and her weapon, the tools of her identity. She did not go quietly. She accused Crendler of colluding with Mason Verger to sell Lecter to the highest bidder, challenging him to a polygraph. But the die was cast. As she left, disgraced and disarmed, she saw the toll the morning had taken on Jack Crawford. He had collapsed in the library, his heart finally failing him, leaving Starling utterly isolated as the wolves circled. Chapter 73. While the FBI celebrated its history and Starling's career was dismantled on the evening news, Dr. Hannibal Lecter sat in his rented palazzo, watching the world through a screen. He was watching a documentary on Stephen Hawking, specifically a segment on entropy and the arrow of time, how a shattered teacup cannot reassemble itself. This concept of reversing time was the engine of Lecter's madness. He did not care about the laws of physics. He cared about the reversal of loss. In his mind, he superimposed the image of Clarice Starling over the memory of his murdered sister, Misha. He believed that if the universe could contract, if time could fold back, a space could be created in the world for Misha to return. And in his terrifying calculus, Starling was the vessel. Her existence was the placeholder, for the dead girl. He watched the news, seeing Starling stripped of her dignity, and his obsession deepened. To him, her destruction by the Bureau only cleared the way for her reconstruction in his own design. Chapter 74. The Doctor's affection for high culture did not dull his predatory instincts, it sharpened them. Lecter returned to the mundane reality of Maryland to prepare for the endgame. He infiltrated a hospital, disguising himself as a workman, then a surgeon. He moved with the invisibility of a chameleon. He incapacitated a doctor and a pharmacist, stealing their credentials and a cache of high-grade sedatives and hypnotics. This was not just theft, it was logistical preparation for a departure. He ordered a tuxedo and a bottle of Chateau d'Yquem wine, a vintage from Starling's birth year. He was preparing for a celebration, a dark festival that required both chemical restraints and the finest indulgences. He was a creature of appetites, and he intended to feed them all. Chapter 75. Paul Krendler, meanwhile, was busy selling his soul, using the illegal access provided by Starling's own insights, which he had stolen. He and his team tracked Lecter's magazine subscriptions and the purchase of the rare wine. The purchase of the Chateau d'Yquem triggered a silent alarm in the database. Krendler knew Lecter was in the area. Instead of alerting the Bureau or protecting Starling, he contacted Mason Verger. He provided Verger's mercenaries with a tracking device he had planted on Starling's car. He knew Lecter would come for her. Krendler was essentially using Starling as live bait, dangling her in the water to draw out the Leviathan, fully aware that the jaws snapping shut would belong to Mason Verger's pigs. Chapter 76. In the suffocating atmosphere of Mason Verger's bedroom, illuminated by the eel aquarium, the final trap was set. Mason, Krendler, and the Sardinian kidnapper Carlo reviewed security footage from the wine shop. They confirmed the identity of the man in the beard. It was him. Mason's instructions for the capture were a manifesto of cruelty. He did not just want Lecter dead, he wanted a culinary theatre of suffering. He instructed Carlo to bring Lecter in alive and undamaged. The plan was specific. Lecter would be fed to the pigs in courses. First, the feet would be gnawed off while Lecter watched through the bars. Then he would be kept alive overnight, bleeding and legless, to anticipate the consumption of his face the following day. Mason wanted the doctor to remain conscious, to see the eyes of the swine as they ate him. It was a vision of vengeance so absolute it bordered on the religious, a sacrament of flesh and pain. Chapter 77. The convergence of these violently disparate lives occurred on a banal afternoon, Clarice Starling's birthday. She was trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy, grocery shopping for a dinner she didn't want, driving her Mustang through the grey slush of winter. She was unaware that she was the centre of a hunting party. Carlo and his team, disguised in a medical transport van, tracked the beacon on her car to a supermarket parking lot. They watched her struggle with coupons, a mundane warrior stripped of her armour. And then the doctor appeared. Hannibal Lecter emerged from the rows of cars carrying the wine, moving towards Starling's Mustang with a terrifying whimsy. He intended to leave the gift, a gesture of courtship and dominance. He picked the lock of her car, the predator momentarily distracted by his own ritual. Carlo seized the moment. The pneumatic rifle cracked, breathless and quiet. A tranquilizer dart slammed into Lecter's neck. The drug was potent, designed to drop a beast, and it hit the doctor hard. As his knees buckled and the chemicals turned his blood to water, he slumped against the car. In his final moment of consciousness, his mind did not go to fear, but to his obsession. He whispered a single name: Mischa. Starling, alerted by the sound of the air rifle, ran toward the scene. She saw the van, the struggle, the legs disappearing inside. She thought it was a mugging. She screamed. She chased. She wrote the license plate in the dirt on a hood, but she was unarmed and too late. The van sped away, carrying the monster to a fate worse than any prison. Breathing hard in the cold air, Starling looked down at the pavement near her car. There, lying on the asphalt, was the bottle of Chateau d'Yquem, and a note in copperplate script wishing her a happy birthday. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't a mugging. It was him. And now, the monsters had the monster. Chapter 78. Clarice Starling stands in the cold chaos of a public payphone, desperation clawing at her. She has just witnessed the impossible, Hannibal Lecter, snatched in broad daylight by a frantic van crew. But when she connects with the FBI's reactive squad and finally reaches Clint Pearsall, the system she swore to uphold crumbles around her. She offers them everything: the description of the van, the bottle of vintage Chateau d'Yquem left as Lecter's signature calling card, the logic that Mason Verger is the only man capable of such a bold abduction. Pearsall's response is a study in bureaucratic cowardice. He questions her sanity, suggesting she is seeing things, gaslighting her into the box of a hysteric. It is a crushing moment of realization for Starling. The institution does not care about truth, only liability. Pearsall warns her that there is no going back, unknowingly pushing her across a threshold. She is no longer an agent. She is a witness being erased. Chapter 79. The machinery of corruption turns instantly. Paul Krendler, the embodiment of ambition over morality, alerts Mason Verger that Starling is a loose end. Mason, secure in his wealth and malice, dismisses Starling as a nuisance to be managed, instructing Krendler to paint her as a harasser. It is a conspiracy of silence between the law and the lawless. Chapter 80. Back in the silence of her duplex, Starling finds herself locked out. Her access to the FBI computer grid is denied. She has less authority now than a rural constable. Pearsall calls again to twist the knife, confirming that Mason has covered his tracks by inviting local law enforcement to tour his property, effectively neutralizing any chance of a warrant. He tells her to stay out of it, reminding her she is just Joe Blow. But isolation brings clarity. Starling looks at the artifacts of her life and feels the spirit of her ancestors, the warrior archetype rising within her. If the world will not protect the law, she will enforce it within the reach of her own arm. She retrieves a bequest from a fallen comrade, John Brigham, a heavy box containing the tools of violence, a Colt 45, a backup pistol, a dagger. She straps them on, shedding her bureaucratic skin. She prints a map of Muskrat Farm. She is not going as an officer, she is going as a force of nature. Chapter 81. At Muskrat Farm, the atmosphere is electric with sadistic anticipation. Mason Verger views his triumph through the lens of twisted science, comparing his capture of Lecter to the discovery of radium. He envisions the doctor glowing in the dark, a prize to be consumed. The trap is set. The pigs are hungry, and Mason prepares to savor the end of his obsession. Chapter 82. The barn is a theater of cruelty. Dr. Lecter is displayed like a grotesque altarpiece, bound to a crossbeam, his feet dangling. It is a tableau of suffering illuminated by firelight. Mason, safe in his room, taunts Lecter via a monitor, promising a slow death by swine. But even bound and facing torture, Lecter's mind is a fortress. When the Sardinian kidnapper Carlo electrocutes him, shocking his eye into a swollen ruin, Lecter refuses to break. He retreats into his memory palace, finding solace against the cool marble of a statue, and delivers his defiance. He is not taking the chocolate. He will not give Mason the satisfaction of fear. Chapter 83. Margot Verger enters the barn, a player in a game she is only just beginning to understand. She holds the power of payment over the kidnappers, bribing Carlo with his future freedom to ensure the job is finished. But when she confronts Lecter, the dynamic shifts. Even helpless, Lecter acts as the psychiatrist. He dissects her trauma, reminding her that Mason will never truly reward her. He plants a lethal suggestion. she should kill Mason herself. He offers himself as the scapegoat, the perfect suspect to die before Mason, leaving her with the inheritance and the freedom. Margot, hardened by years of abuse, rejects his offer of help but takes something else, a lock of his hair torn from his scalp and walnuts to mask the taste of death. She leaves him to his fate, but the seed of patricide has been watered. Chapter 84. Starling arrives at the periphery of the nightmare. She bypasses the main gate, cutting through the fence of the fire road. It is a stealthy insertion into a hostile world. Under the cover of darkness, she drives her Mustang deep into the forest, the engine a low rumble against the silence. She is trespassing into a private hell. Chapter 85. Inside the barn, the torment continues. Cordell, Mason's nurse and accomplice, offers Lecter a bargain, a painless overdose in exchange for his banking codes. It is a moment of pure greed masked as mercy. Lecter, feigning submission, lures Cordell close and strikes with viper-like speed, biting a chunk of flesh from Cordell's face. The nurse retaliates with fire, burning Lecter's chest, but the doctor remains silent. He is hoisted onto a forklift, an offering raised high for the swine, rigged with tourniquets to prolong his bleeding, to keep him fresh for the main course. Chapter 86. The climax erupts in violence and chaos. Starling moves through the dark, guided by the screams of pigs and the hum of machinery. She finds the barn, a surreal arena where the great hogs surge against the barriers. She sees Lecter suspended on the forklift, Mason watching from his van, and the kidnappers preparing the slaughter. Starling does not hesitate. She announces herself, not with a badge, but with a command. When the corrupt Deputy Mowgli draws on her, she drops him with a double tap to the chest. She seizes control, forcing the Sardinians to cuff themselves. She cuts Lecter free, handing him a weapon, treating him as a temporary ally in a zone of absolute danger. But there is another player, Tommaso, hidden in the loft. He fires a tranquilizer rifle, striking Starling. The world tilts. She fires back, wounding him, but a second dart finds her. As the narcotics flood her system, her vision fails. The pigs break through. In this moment, the monster becomes the savior. Lecter, free and lethal, does not flee alone. He scoops the collapsing Starling into his arms. He moves with unnatural grace through the chaotic tide of blood and swine. The pigs, sensing a predator greater than themselves, do not attack him. He carries her into the night, pausing only to remove the darts from her body with his mouth, before they vanish into the roar of the Mustang's engine. Chapter 87. The aftermath at Muskrat Farm is a scene of carnage and confusion. Mason is apoplectic, denied his spectacle. Margot takes charge, not to save her brother, but to secure her future. She descends into the barn, driving through the grisly remains of the kidnappers who fell to the pigs. She finds Tommaso, the sole survivor, and buys his silence. As she stands amidst the ruin, she collects the evidence, preparing to reshape the narrative of the night to suit her own ends. The game has changed, and the pieces are moving toward a final checkmate. Chapter 88. The carnage at the barn has ended, leaving behind a silence heavy with blood and the damp chill of winter. Tommaso, the Sardinian loyalist, drives Mason Verger away from the slaughter. His mind already weaving the events into mythology, he tells her the pigs did not merely spare Dr. Lecter, they stood back in reverence. To his superstitious eyes, the animals recognized a superior predator, perhaps even a deity. This becomes the legend Tommaso will whisper for the rest of his life. The doctor, floating away on a sea of swine, untouchable. It is a chilling reminder of how Hannibal Lecter affects the world around him. He does not just survive chaos, he is elevated by it. Margot, however, has earthly business to conclude. She enters the mansion, the quiet eye of the hurricane. She finds Cordell, Mason's henchman, tending to the invalid. There is a cold, mechanical efficiency to what follows. Margot demands a martini for her brother. When Cordell crouches to the refrigerator, she strikes. A farrier's hammer, a tool meant for shoeing horses, cracks the base of his skull. It is a wet popping sound, unglamorous and final. She finishes him on the floor, feeling absolutely nothing. This is the absence of affect that often accompanies deep trauma, or, in this case, the liberation of revenge. She enters Mason's room. The air is thick with the hum of life support machines and the silent, circling presence of the moray eel in its aquarium. Mason, oblivious and vile, rages about the failure at the barn. He plans to cover it up, to start over. He calls for Cordell, unaware that his protector is cooling on the floor nearby. Margot reveals the truth. Cordell is dead. The pigs have eaten the Sardinians, and she is here to collect what is owed. The scene that ensues is a grotesque parody of intimacy. Margot extracts the necessary genetic material from Mason using a cattle prod, a violent inversion of the reproductive act, stealing the future from a man she's about to destroy. Then, the true horror begins. She introduces Mason to his own monster. She lifts the great eel from the tank, its body muscular and slick, teeth like curved glass. She forces the creature down Mason's throat. It is a symbolic suffocation. The thing he kept for amusement, a phallic beast of prey, now consumes him from the inside out. The eel seizes his tongue. Mason drowns in his own blood and the thrashing body of the eel. Margot watches until the heart monitor flattens, scraping a sample of skin from the piece of Lecter's scalp Mason still clutches. She leaves with her prize, a potential heir, warm in her pocket. The cycle of abuse in the Verger family ends not with justice, but with biblical retribution. Chapter 89. We shift from the violent external world to the suspended animation of Dr. Lecter's care. Clarice Starling lies deep in a drug-induced slumber, restrained by silk, protected by the very monster she hunted. The atmosphere here is one of obsessive tenderness. Lecter watches her with the intensity of a scientist and a lover. He is treating her injuries, yes, but he is also engaging in a metaphysical experiment. While she sleeps, Lecter works on equations of string theory and astrophysics. He is chasing a desperate, impossible ghost, the reversal of entropy. He wants time to move backward. He wants to shatter the teacup and have it reassemble itself. His goal is not just to heal Starling, but to bend the laws of the universe to retrieve his murdered sister, Misha, from the darkness of the past. In his mind, Starling is the vessel, the space where Misha might live again. It is a terrifying glimpse into Lecter's madness. He believes his will is strong enough to rewrite reality. Chapter 90. At Muskrat Farm, the mundane world tries to process the massacre. The police, led by a detective named Franks, question Margot. She plays the role of the grieving sister perfectly, weeping for the cameras and the cops. She spins a tale of intruders. The authorities are baffled by the carnage, the missing bodies eaten by the pigs, and the bizarre death of Mason Verger. Margot and her partner Judy prepare to weather the storm, armed with the semen sample and the vast Verger fortune. It is a cynical commentary on how wealth and performance can obscure the most jagged truths. Chapter 91. Starling begins to surface. She wakes to the smell of herbs and the sound of chamber music. She is in a place that feels removed from time, the eye of the storm. Lecter appears, no longer the prisoner behind glass, but a free man in his own domain. He is courteous, domestic, and terrifyingly calm. He checks her pupils, treats her like a fragile object. Starling is disassociated, floating in a chemical haze where fear has been chemically excised. She is herself and not herself, a state of malleability that Lecter carefully cultivates. Chapter 92. Days bleed into nights. The conditioning continues. Lecter provides her with clothes, elegant silks and cashmeres that replace her FBI armor. He returns her weapons, a psychological gambit to show he does not fear her, or perhaps to suggest she no longer needs them for him. They discuss the tracking device in her car. She helps him disable it. This is a crucial turning point. Starling is using her tradecraft not to catch the killer, but to aid him. She's sliding from the role of the lawman to the accomplice, guided by the soothing, hypnotic rhythm of Lecter's voice. Chapter 93. Paul Krendler, the embodiment of bureaucratic corruption, scrambles for safety. With Mason dead, he is exposed, but he finds relief in the corruption of others. A congressman reaches out, assuming the Verger political machine will roll on. Krendler believes he has survived. Meanwhile, the FBI is in disarray. Starling is missing, but not officially kidnapped. Her friend Ardelia Mapp is furious, sensing the Bureau's indifference. Mapp is the anchor to Starling's old life, the reality principle that is slowly fading away as Starling drifts deeper into Lecter's dream world. Chapter 94. The therapy deepens. Lecter uses psychotropic drugs and hypnosis to walk Starling through the corridors of her memory. He is searching for the roots of her trauma, the screaming of the lambs. He guides her to a confrontation with the memory of her father. In this hallucination, her father appears not as a saint, but as a man, warm, smelling of tobacco and soap. They share a moment of simple connection, eating oranges and snowballs. But Lecter forces the realization. He is dead. He cannot stay. This is the beginning of the severance. To make room for himself, Lecter must deconstruct the idol of the father that has ruled Starling's subconscious for so long. Chapter 95. Under the influence of the therapy, Starling's buried resentment erupts. She voices thoughts she would never dare admit in a waking state. Anger at her father for dying, for being a night watchman who got himself killed for nothing, leaving her alone. Lecter listens, pleased. He is surgically removing her superego, the part of her governed by duty and loyalty to the badge. He takes her to a room where her father's bones, stolen and prepared by Lecter, lie on a bed. It is a macabre confrontation. He forces her to see the reality of death, just calcium and dust. She places John Brigham's badge on the bones, a symbolic surrendering of her career and her guilt. She weeps, letting go of the grief that has defined her. Lecter sees the pattern. She has transferred her loyalty from the father to the institutions that replaced him, the FBI, Crawford, the law, and the face of that law is now the hated Paul Krendler. Lecter realizes he can use that hatred. He doesn't need to replace her personality with Misha's. He only needs to liberate the dark, vengeful potential that was always there. Chapter 96. A brief interlude of tension in the real world. Ardelia Mapp, desperate to find Clarice, corners Barney the orderly in his apartment. She holds a gun to his face, demanding answers. Barney, the ultimate survivor, plays dumb. He survives because he knows how to be invisible, how to observe without being seen. He lies, but he also prepares. Later, he collects DNA samples, saliva and hair from an old mask of Lecter's he stole. Barney is hoarding insurance. In a world of monsters, he is the rodent who survives by being smarter than the cats. Chapter 97. Lecter prepares for the final act of Starling's transformation. The setting is a rented house filled with flowers and stolen art, beauty masking the abyss. He sets the table for three. He treats the preparation of food with the same reverence he treats music or surgery. It is a ceremony of taste and smell, the most primitive senses, bypassing the moral centers of the brain. He is setting the stage for a communion that will shatter the last of Starling's inhibitions. Chapter 98. Barney makes his move. He visits Margot Verger and sells her the Lecter DNA. It's a transaction of mutual assurance. If he falls, she falls. Margot pays him enough to vanish. Barney packs his bags. He knows the ecosystem has changed. The predators are loose. and it is time for the observers to leave the theatre. Chapter 99. Starling descends the stairs dressed in silk and emeralds, a vision of dark elegance. She and Lecter stand before a mirror. He tells her that pity has no place at this table. He is instructing her to view the world as he does, as a spectacle, an aesthetic experience where morality is irrelevant. He drugs her slightly, not to incapacitate her, but to open her sensory gates wide. She is no longer the agent. She is the consort. The sexual tension is palpable, but it is sublimated into the ritual of the dinner. Chapter 100. They enter the dining room. The guest of honor is waiting, Paul Crendler. He is strapped to a chair, sedated, confused, but still spewing his petty, misogynistic bile. Lecter has performed a craniotomy on him while he was alive. The top of Crendler's skull is removed, his brain exposed to the air. The horror of this scene lies in its surreal civility. Lecter cooks slices of Crendler's prefrontal lobe in brown butter and truffles, while Crendler mumbles nursery rhymes and insults. It is the ultimate violation, to eat a man's mind while he watches. But for Starling, this is the breaking of the final taboo. Crendler represents the bureau, the glass ceiling, the mediocrity that stifled her brilliance. Starling does not recoil. She partakes. She eats the organ of the system that oppressed her. When Crendler insults her one last time, she does not arrest him. She dismisses him. The law is now meat on a plate. The transformation is sealed not with a scream, but with a whisper. Starling asks Lecter about the breast he was denied as a child for his sister's sake. In a moment of shocking intimacy, she exposes her own breast to him, offering him the wine from her own lips. It is a rejection of the father-daughter dynamic and an acceptance of a new, dark equality. She has not become Misha. She has become his partner. The teacup does not come back together. It is ground into dust, and from the dust, something new and terrifying is born. Chapter 102. 3 years have passed. We find Barney in Buenos Aires, living the good life with a new companion. He goes to the opera, hoping to see a Vermeer, but instead he sees them. In a box seat, glittering with jewels and dangerous allure, are Hannibal Lecter and Clarice Starling. They are a golden couple, predators moving effortlessly through high society. Barney watches them through borrowed opera glasses. He sees Starling's profile, the courage beauty mark. He sees the intimacy between them, the touch of hands, the shared laughter. They are monsters, yes, but they are happy monsters. Then the doctor turns. His gaze sweeps the audience. Barney feels the weight of those eyes, even across the vast opera house. Chapter 103. The survival instinct that has kept Barney alive kicks in instantly. He grabs his companion and flees. He knows that to be seen is to die. He leaves the continent, abandoning the Vermeer, choosing life over art. Back in the city, the Mercedes carries the couple into the night. We learn that their life is one of high culture, multiple languages, and voracious appetites. They have built a memory palace together, a shared mind space where the ghosts of the past, Misha, Starling's father, Crawford, are stored away in quiet rooms. The teacup never gathered itself together. The entropy was not reversed. Instead, they accepted the chaos and built a fortress within it. Clarice Starling did not survive Hannibal Lecter. She evolved into his perfect match. The lamb has stopped screaming because it has become the lion. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the mind of a monster, please subscribe to Dark Realities and join us next time as we dive into the lore of horror classics. Sleep well.